Hi, in this module we'll discuss about pivot tables. Now I've broken down this module into different sessions and in the first one we'll discuss what are pivot tables. Then we'll also discuss a couple of ways by which you can create a pivot table and then we'll also discuss about its structure. In the second session we'll then discuss about formatting a pivot table and then we'll move on to options like summarize by value and show values by. And in the last session, we'll discuss about the pivot graphs and the various pivot table options. Now coming back to the first question, what is a pivot? A pivot table is a very powerful tool in Excel as it can be used to create summary reports and also to analyze data in an Excel file. So for example, in the banking industry, there are like hundreds of thousands of transactions which happen daily via debit cards. Now, most of these transactions would be from genuine customers and a handful of them would be through fraudsters. But using pivot tables, we can play around with the customer attributes, the transaction attributes, and identify a risky segment, thus identifying fraudsters. So a pivot table can be created for thousands of rows of information, hundreds of thousands, or even 20 observations. Over here, I've got 25 employees from a company. I've got their marital status, country, gender, age, salary, number of portfolios they've worked on, the number of cases which they've worked on, and successful cases. So what I'll do, I'll use this particular data set to create a pivot table and then we can discuss about its structure. So one of the ways is I want to create a pivot table for this particular data set. So I've clicked on this particular data set. I'll go to insert. I'll click on pivot table. So Excel will automatically select this entire range as the underlying data for my pivot table. Now pivot table will give me options to create a pivot on the new worksheet or on an existing worksheet. So I can click on existing worksheet and then I can go to any of these existing worksheets and click on a particular cell where I want my pivot table to start with. But usually I prefer the new worksheet and click on OK. So now this is one way by which you can create a pivot table. Let's just delete this and let's look at the second option also. So I'll select this data. I'll click on Alt D P. Now this gives me a pivot table and pivot chart wizard. I'll click on next. Now because I had already selected this data, Excel has already put this in my range. I'll click on next. And now again I'll get the same option of having a pivot table on the new worksheet or an existing worksheet. Let's click on new worksheet. So pivot table has got created now. Let's name it as pivot. Now let me just minimize it a bit. Okay, now this particular area, this will have all your column names. So I've got name, marital status, country, gender, age, salary, portfolios worked on, cases worked on, successful cases. So I've got all these variables over here. In filters, we can drag and drop any of these variables. Now usually we put those variables for which we want to apply a filter or a condition on, and we'll see how this works out. In columns, we will drag and drop that variable for which we want its different values to appear in different columns. In rows, we will drag and drop that variable for which we want its different values to appear in different rows. And over here in values, we will drag and drop those variables for which we want to summarize the data or say count the data or say sum the data. So let's see how this works. So for my marital status, I can see that there are two options, married or single. For my country, I've got UK or USA. Similarly, for names, I've got these different options over here. So using these drop down arrows, I can see the different values in a particular variable. Let's say we want to calculate the number of employees by the region they reside in and the number of portfolios they've worked in. So let me put the region over here. So I've got UK and USA over two different rows. And for columns, I'll have the number of portfolios they worked on. So portfolios worked on has four distinct values, 1, 2, 3, 4, which have been listed over here. So using this pivot table now, I've got 8 different options. So for UK, I've got 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Similarly for USA, I've got 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's calculate the number of employees across these combinations. So I'll drag and drop name over here in values. Now because name is a character variable, so Excel will automatically count it. So as you can see, for employees residing in UK, there are 4 employees who worked on one portfolio. There is only one employee who's worked on two portfolios. There are 4 employees who worked on 3 and 4 portfolios. Similarly, for USA, you've got 4 employees who worked on one portfolio. For USA, you've got 4 employees who worked on two portfolios, then one employee on 3 portfolios, and 3 employees on 4 portfolios. Now, one thing is that you can look at these distinct combinations also. But then another thing which you can summarize quickly from here is that there are 8 employees who worked on one portfolio. There are 5 employees who worked on two portfolios, 5 on 3 portfolios, and 7 on 4 portfolios. Similarly, you can see that there are 13 employees who are residing in UK and 12 who are residing in USA. Now let's look at some of these different terms, row labels, grand total or column labels which we've come across. So row labels basically it's sort of representing the variable which has been put in row. Column labels similar to row labels, just that this is based on variable which has been put in column field in the pivot table. Grand total, it's appearing twice, so it just basically sums up all the values of the field which are being summarized. Then count of name over here. Now because we are trying to count the number of employees across regions and portfolios they worked on, we drag the name field in the value section. So count of name over here suggests that we are counting the number of names. Now let's say I don't want to look at the number of employees, but I want to look at the salaries across these 8 different combinations. So I'll remove name from here, and as I drag it to the filter section, the count of gets removed now because we are no longer counting names now. Let's put salary over here. So whenever you put a numeric value over in value section, Excel will sum it. So over here it is showing that it is summing the salary. Now let's try and apply some filters also. So let's put gender in the filter section. Now I've got gender appearing over here. Now let's say I just want to look at the male population over here. So I'll click on this drop down arrow and this window will pop up. It shows the different values which are there for this particular variable. So for example, for name, we've got these different names. So again, click on gender. Now for selecting only male, I'll click on M and now I'll click on OK. Now whatever numbers which we are left with over here, they all belong to the male population. Let's apply another filter. Let's put age over here. Now for age, I've got these different options. Let's say I want to select more than one option. By default, all are selected. So I'll click on select multiple items. I'll untick this and now I can select whatever I want to. Let's say I select all less than 26. Click on OK. So now I'm just left with all the male population with their age less than 26. Now what I want you to do is, using this sales data, I want you to create a pivot table similar to this and then just play around with these different options of filter, rows, columns, or different values. In the next session, we'll look at formatting a pivot table and we'll also look at value field settings. So summarize values by and show values as options. Thank you.